You're listening to the Light Over Time podcast with David Sargent and Korey Bartos. It is September 17th, 2024, and this is episode 41. How are you doing, David?
It is episode 41. I'm doing great. I was thinking about that, actually, as I was listening back on our last episode, that it was episode 40, and we've come a long way. And no doubt we'll hit triple digits at some point, but it just feels good to have 40 of something running continuously.
Yeah, feels good.
Yeah.
Got a pretty decent set of topics today. I'm happy to begin with what you've been up to or what I've been up to. It's up to you.
Sure. I think we started with you last time, so I'll go ahead and just kick it off.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I will say that obviously, maybe not obvious to everybody, we had some pretty big nights of Northern Lights, literally last night and the night before. And I did go out and shoot both of those. And that's pretty much what I'll talk about. I guess the other little part is trying to get out more for birds to track fall migration. It's a tricky one. Yeah. It's not like spring migration where pretty much anywhere where you hear a bird, you'll hear lots of birds. This is a little bit more spread out, it seems. And then both geographically and chronologically, or by timeline of what birds come down when. So it's a little bit more difficult to kind of be confident that you'll go out and get something. But what's the fun if there's no hunt, right? Yeah, so fair. I've been out probably 3 or 4 times now. Very little luck. Like, chickadees are happy to see me, and that's about it. Really nothing past chickadees and crows and the occasional belted kingfisher who essentially just chirps along the lake and doesn't let me get close in any capacity. But it's a little more difficult here than where I was in East Jordan at the river, where I was able to get pretty much right under their perches and they were relatively unbothered. But yeah, just a little bit of birding here and there. I'm going to keep going with it because my brain wants to just understand the patterns and the trends. And yeah.
And we'll be up next month, so yeah. Hopefully we'll see some birds when we're up there.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The kingfisher. There is one that has been toying with me because I live along the river here in Lansing, and we'll walk along the little river trail. There's a nice little boardwalk thing that they built. And every once in a while, I'll hear him kiki. Yeah. And I'm like, I want to photograph you so bad. And just won't show itself. But we're pretty fortunate around here. We actually get probably north of 10 species daily. Nice. Around the river in Old Town. So it's been fruitful, at least a little bit.
One of the hard things about kingfisher, too, is when you hear them, that's not a good time to photograph them because they only do that when they're flying. And when they're flying, they're very agile. So you must be prepared for it if you're going to track from where they went to where they go. And the one, at least around me, he kind of has free reign of the entire lake, which is sizable enough that as soon as I hear him, I pretty much know there's no shot. I have to, for this guy, I'm going to have to be prepared well in advance before sunrise and just be at the 2 perches that I know that I can have access to and just cross my fingers for hours probably. Unlike the kingfisher, there were 3 or 4 that I had access to on the river in East Jordan and would basically just sit capturing everything else until they came along, which was quite convenient. So it's going to be more work for kingfisher here, but I think the payoff would be better.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. It's one of my favorite birds to shoot. But the very first time I went birding after Tawas, that one landed right in front of me on a log and yelled at me. And then I got a couple more shots of it hunting. And then the second time, obviously I got those really excellent photos of them. But they're super fun to photograph.
Yeah, I had a customer come into the shop the other day and give me a good recommendation. He said it was an eBird hotspot, but I don't typically look in the Gwyn area, which is about 20 miles south of me, for photographic opportunities. And I used to live near Gwyn, and apparently there's it's called the Gwyn Sewage Ponds, And I Google mapped it just to like, what the heck does that mean? And it's 3 rectangular, like definitely for like water treatment type of situation. But he said it's an eBird hotspot, and so it looks as though it would be like wetland type birds, like herons and stuff like that. So I may end up taking a trip down there, like maybe this weekend, even though that the idea of like going around like like a treatment facility or something like that seems a little counterproductive for wildlife and nature, but I think it's worth the look. And he says he goes and walks around it and gets good stuff. He does a little bit of the photography, so I might as well try it once. But yeah, just a little bit of birding here and there. Nothing too crazy. Once I start seeing stuff, you'll hear from me.
Yeah.
And then if you want, I can jump right into the Northern Lights.
Sure. Yeah. I saw that you had a pretty good night. I think the night before it was a little less exciting, right?
Yeah.
And I followed some of the story. There was a lot of them. But yeah.
Totally. So I'll start with the night before. Actually, I'll start like 4 days ago. The sun had a solar flare that was classed as an X4. And so if you're familiar, like C-class X flares come right before C-class flares come right before X-class flares in the categorization of, I guess you would say, intensity. And so an X-class flare is definitely enough to get an astrophotographer's ears perked. So we had an X4, which is great. But that means nothing unless there's a CME produced from the flare, which is to say that there's stuff that gets thrown away from the sun. And then if there is stuff thrown away from the sun, it has to be directed at Earth to matter. And it was, which is a triple bonus. And in this case, we have like radio frequency imagery we can look at to determine like how accurately thrown at Earth is it? Is it like off to the side? Is it called what we say a glancing blow? Or do we get like a full symmetrical halo where we can see that it's coming right at Earth? And in this case, it was a glancing blow. And there's data we look for, right? How fast a CME goes from sun to Earth takes roughly 2 to 3 days. And so when it comes to like day 2, nobody's really sure that we're going to get hit with the CME on that night or the night after. And so my motto is just try to be in the right time and the right place. Give yourself as many opportunities as you possibly can. So that's what I did. And we did not have good luck on the first night. The CME did not hit. And we were waiting and waiting and waiting. So on the entire first night, we had nothing. The alternative to that was I was in a cool spot, and we were able to get some images of some very different things that I normally don't photograph, which is to say I was in a cool spot, Black Rocks, Prescott Park in Marquette. I was there waiting for the Northern Lights, so we have a good northern view. So there was nothing. We had hardly any stars in the sky because we had almost a full moon, right? That makes it difficult to do general astrophotography. We had light pollution, which makes it difficult to do astrophotography. The only reason I was there and trying it all was because I have in the past once done full moon Northern Lights photography, and when it's in combination with a really good show, the illumination of the moon can help you compose a different type of astrophotography where the foreground is illuminated, and so you get lots of color where there wouldn't be. And didn't get that first night, so I ended up doing a little bit of intimate detail with lichen on the Black Rocks. There's like bright yellow and orange lichen, which is really cool against a darker rock. So I took some images of that, and then there was a bunch of frogs next to small little pools of water. And so I got real close to some frogs, and there was at one point, I was looking at this rock, the top of this rock, looking at it going, this kind of looks like a bit of a mountaintop. And so taking a shot with the 50 mil, just framing the top of this rock that maybe is as wide as two of me. I framed it such that without any context for size, you wouldn't know that it wasn't a mountaintop. I like that kind of stuff. So that's what we did with the first night. I haven't edited any of those images, but I had fun. It's a cool spot to be in, and that's kind of the second motto there is just whether you expect to get anything and do or don't, just try to have fun. Have a second game plan. Try not to be negative about the situation. So I was there until midnight. As a 32-year-old adult now who is working during the week, it's a little tough to work it in, but I work in a night like that. But knowing that the CME was still on the way, I already knew that I was going to have another night. Right. The next night was going to have to be another long night. So I am a little tired now because I've got some sleep to catch up on. But night 2 was rewarding. We had, as soon as I showed up, I drove about 30 minutes west of where I live. I have multiple little tiny spots that are like marked for potential for astrophotography. And usually I try to go scout these spots in the daytime, but when we've got like sudden events like this happen, I'll just drive out there and see what I see. So I had this one spot marked on a small lake. I drove out there 30 minutes and come to find out it's private property and there's a gate, which I could have done a little more research to find that out, but no biggie. The UP is not at a lack of places to just like stop and pull off and have a pretty site. So literally like 2 minutes down the road was a public park with like benches and it's like little campsites, and there was nobody there. I pulled into that. It didn't have quite the, I would say, like beachfront of on this lake. I was in this tiny little compact cove. And I had to make do, and I made do. As soon as I got up there, it was about, I want to say 8:45 or so. And at about an hour earlier, I noticed it looked like we got hit with the CME. You can see real-time data. You can see things like the BZ drop, solar wind speed picks up. All of these like metrics suddenly jump. And you'll see this spike across the board, right? And so that's when you kind of know. And then it sustains. As long as it sustains and it's not some anomaly, then you kind of know. And you're expecting it anyway. So about 7:45, the BZ drops quite heavily. That's good. That's a weakening of our magnetic field for Earth, and when the magnetic field is weakened, CME has more potential to charge up and create the northern lights, right? So that happened. As I got there, I could see a green band. It was still kind of twilight, but we're getting to a darker place where we can start to see that stuff pretty well. And not with my eyes, but I could see a green band on the camera. Full moon behind me illuminating the sky. And then over the course of the next hour, I would say half hour, the green band gets a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker, and I could start to see it waving and little bits of curtains here dancing in one spot. And then it starts to get smaller, and we were like wondering what's happening here. The BZ was like up and down a little bit, and then suddenly it started to grow, and it was no longer a band. It was the complete and total sky. In my frame, using the 20 millimeter lens, was completely green. So this was an indicator for me. As the BZ was completely low, this was now the northern lights have kind of charged themselves up, and it's starting to display. And I made some correlation with, okay, it spent about 20 to 30 minutes with a heavily weakened magnetic field, and then it took about 20 minutes for it to display, and it took about 20 minutes for that full display to take place, and it was incredible. The sky was completely green, and then I was having trouble like framing anything because it was just green everywhere. So like, what then do you do if the entire sky has no definition but just one cast of green, right? And then suddenly it just started getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and there were shapes, and there was this big swath of green on the left that suddenly started to morph into green on the bottom and red on the top, and the red got deeper and deeper and more saturated. And I would say this is the first time, I think, in my life that I was able to see red with the naked eye. It's almost like you have to see it to believe it, but it was there. It was huge, just absolutely huge, this big blob of bright northern lights on the northwestern side, and it was stretching almost east to west. It was wild. And then as that was at its peak, we had just pillars everywhere, just shimmering from east to west. It was incredible. And then the BZ tipped up. We were at like negative 17, 18, 19 for a 20-minute period or so. And then after that, it tipped back up to like -6, averaging for quite a while. And so once the intensity of that show was at its peak, it had about 15 minutes, and then it started to quiet back down. So during that peak, I got what I could out of that little cove I was at. I got all the shots that I could manage, got out of there and drove down a little ways. And even as I was driving down, I could tell that things were starting to wind down a little. I was going to go to Van Riper State Park, which was 11 miles back east towards where I live. But even as I was driving, I could tell I should probably stop off earlier than that and just get what I can out of the rest of the night. So I found this little river and I almost like screeched my tires to a halt because I was like, oh, I got to pull off over here. So I pulled off. It's called Spur River. There was cool dead trees everywhere. The river was nice to work with, nice enough anyway. And it was a really, really not well-traveled road. There was hardly anyone around. So I worked with that for the next 20 or 30 minutes. The Northern Lights did not pick back up the way they were. And I kept watching the data in real time as well. And I was not convinced that we were going to see that same activity pick back up. So I shot for another 30 minutes, got lots of great stuff. There's still plenty of green Northern Lights in the sky, but they were a little bit more diffuse and not nearly as bright. But to say that we saw Northern Lights at all in 100% full moon brightness was just incredible. I've never seen it quite like that with a full moon ever in my life. So it made it a top 5 for sure, maybe top 3 Northern Lights event for me. And it only lasted really like well and truly about 20 minutes, which was, it could go all night. If it wasn't a glancing blow, I think we would have had that activity all night. But I'll take what we can get.
Yeah, I mean, the way you describe it, it sounds very similar to my experience in May, where like for a good sustained amount of time, it was just like crazy shimmering pillars, and I could sit there and just watch them, which was the first time that I've ever been able to see them. And it was when people ask me what it looks like, I just say, think of like the Rainbow Bridge from Thor. Yeah. Like it's basically that, and it's pretty intense. But that's super dope. I definitely wasn't anywhere near a full moon at that time, but I'm sure that's pretty wild to be able to see things around you and it still be super vibrant.
It was incredible. And so the full moon illuminates things well enough so you don't really need a headlamp to do your work or to see your surroundings anyway. But to have the full moon illuminating the landscape around you and then the Northern Lights make it even brighter is like, wow, this is actually outpacing the moon. The full moon, it just blew my mind. It's always crazy to me. Go ahead.
It's like in real time you pulled up your shadow slider for all your foreground elements while you're watching the Northern Lights. Yeah. Super sick.
I just have to say, at least living here, but even back in Charlevoix, some of these, even if they're not the most magnificent, even if they don't last all night, somehow I just get a new understanding of how it can work. It can be different every single time. You can learn something different. This time I was able to really watch that real-time data and try to understand like the relationship between what happens when the CME hits and the BZ drops and how long to wait and what the tendencies are. It's almost like wildlife, right? Like learning tendencies and behaviors. But this time it's the sun produced something for us to watch, and watch I did. And next time I will be even just a little bit more prepared. Every time you learn something.
Yeah, for sure. That's super awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a chance of seeing them, but Elle was so devastated when she woke up and I showed her your story and your image, and she was like, "No!" And then she works for 24 hours tonight, so she was like, "I'm gonna go outside and see if I can see anything. We'll see what happens." Probably not. But,
Probably not. But as I always say, when you have one good night, you tend to have another decent night. But how good, it's hard to say.
Yeah. And I guess there's supposed to be, I don't know, like a harvest supermoon or something tonight. It's supposed to, the moon is supposed to be pretty spectacular tonight, is what I read.
I think a long time ago, I got a little bored with just the moon, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, we'll see what happens. She's brand new to looking up in the sky.
Sure,
so,
yeah. And there's definitely creative takes on the moon, but there was like many years ago where I used the Tamron 150 to 600 like first version of that lens to shoot the moon, and I thought I was hot shit, and at some point you just kind of like, it's the moon, but it can
it's still
be
fun to me.
Yeah.
I have the teleconverter on the 200 to 600, and every time I'm like, I can't believe I can just do that with the stuff that I own. Because it's insane.
So what you got going on?
Not a whole lot. Birding is slowing down just a little bit. And then I went a little gear crazy this week. As I happened to do. I sold the A7C2.
Yeah.
And as if I needed more like crazy reasons to think about gear in my brain, I'm spending a lot of my time utilizing the A7C2 at least as like Elle's bird camera. So instead of just like my needs, like I like to have a B camera, what I need from a B camera to do video, and then what I need it to do for this, that, the other thing. I have placed a lot of artificial demands on like my auxiliary kit. And when we go out and bird, and every time we have some kind of like soar from the gear, I write it down on my phone and see if it comes up again. If it's something that's like a limitation that's actually annoying, like what that could be. And one that's pretty annoying with the A7C2 is that it only goes to 1/4000th of a second, which when it's really bright out, and you're running like the 70 to 200 in the teleconverter at 5.6, 6.3 even, if it's really bright, you're like needing to stop down kind of to the point where you're already getting the negative impact of that 2x teleconverter. And it has a sweet spot like right between 7.1 and like 10. I don't really like to push it past 10, and I don't really like to have it right at 5.6. So like 7.1 really is where you want to be for the most part with birds with the teleconverter and that setup.
Yeah.
And the other thing that started to bug me when I was playing with the 28 to the 28 f2, and then I did some stuff with at work with the 70 to 200 just on it, because I was like, I need to start using this lens more, because it's front curtain electric, front curtain only. It doesn't have a full mechanical shutter. The bokeh is kind of weird sometimes, and it makes the like specular highlights kind of like janky, and it makes me feel like my way too expensive lens, because let's be clear, I should probably just sell it and get the Sigma 70 to 200 for as often as I'm using that lens anymore. But it's super expensive, so you want every little bit of it to be working for you.
Sure.
So if like the shutter is literally affecting your bokeh on a lens that has incredible like rendering, that's a little frustrating.
Yeah.
I got it for a good deal, so I knew that I could like break even ish. I bought the 28 super cheaply, so on a whim I just threw the whole thing up for just a little over what I wanted for it. I sold it for a good price, and same day a guy has on Facebook Marketplace a 24mm f1.4 GM for $750, which, I've had that lens. I knew it was really good when I had it, but at the time I didn't really have a huge use for it because I was using other lenses, and I think I ended up at that time I had the 24 to 70 G Master as well.
Sure.
I kind of like was moving around a lot of stuff because the only lens that I had that I liked was my 70 to 200. and it was really cool, but I was like, okay, this isn't like exactly what I need, so I'm just gonna move it along because I can get like almost $1,000 for it. And I think I made 50 to $100 in profit off of that lens when I sold it. So to see it come up again for cheap enough that I know if I threw it online, I'd be able to get 150 more at least. I was like, dude, I'm just gonna get it and see how it goes. Because I just sold this camera. I have liquid cash. I'm not set up to buy a second camera quite yet. I have the A1 rental is this Friday. So I'll have the Sony A1 and the 51 too. So it's like, I'm just going to get this. It's incredible. It's actually such a good lens.
Sure.
Pairing that with, I've been shooting the A7S III as my daily driver camera, like for my like day-to-day stills just for me. And that freaking sensor, man, I think I might have said it in one of the other episodes since I got it, but it's just something about how it renders everything that makes everything kind of a little bit contrastier. It just makes it pop a little more than the A7 IV. I love the stills out of it to death. And then I'm shooting stuff at work, which I wouldn't normally do at 24 mil. And I'm staying between 1.4 and 2, and it's just super sharp. Everything is like super, super sharp. It pops. I barely have to edit it. I throw like my work preset on it, and that's like it. And I'm like so happy with all the images. And it was actually kind of funny. So the guy was relatively new to shooting when the guy that sold it to me, he just got an A7 IV this year, and he had a couple of different lenses, and I think he sold the ones that he wasn't using because he probably had like a basic lens that he was running, like a zoom, because he also had a 55 he was selling. And he asked, so like, what would you use a 24 for? And I wasn't expecting him to ask me a question like that.
Sure.
So I was like, well, actually quite a lot. So, like I do a lot of like speaking to the camera stuff for work. So anything like that, especially with tight spaces, my studio isn't long where I shoot myself. Interiors, gimbal stuff, astrophotography. And I was like, actually, there's a lot of reasons for me to have a wide. I've been kind of trying to find a good deal on a 20 mil again because I loved that lens. And yeah, I'm super stoked. Going into the next thing, the reason why I felt like it fit the bill really well is because we just put a pre-order in on this Sigma 28 to 105.
We, as in
F2,
the two of us, both of us did this.
Both of us pre-ordered this lens, and I went into it ready to get my feelings hurt. I was like, this is going to be the best freaking lens. I'm going to be so stoked. I was way too thrilled. I was like, I just hope that it's under like, I don't know, $1,800. Like, I just hope that it's good. I hope that it doesn't breathe very much. I hope that it's like solid for video. Like, I just need this freaking lens to do well because I loved the 24 to 105 f4G Sony lens. I took it all over the Philippines. I love that lens to death.
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of perfect. But I don't necessarily on that big of a zoom. Like, I'm really not going, oh, I wish this was wider. Like, I go down to 28, even with the 28 to 70 at work. I'm using the contemporary Sigma, and I go down to 28 and it's plenty. A lot of the time I actually push into 35 because I naturally really like 35 mil. So I was super, super stoked. So I have an old Rokinon 14 mil that I use if I really need something stupid and really wide. And that's like an EF lens, and it's a Cine lens, but I still keep it around because it does the thing. I'll have a 24, I'll have a 24 to 105, I'll have a 70 to 200, and a 200 to 600. And if you can't figure out how to do whatever you need to do with 14 to 600 millimeters, you should probably stop being a photographer.
I mean, you're talking to someone who literally ran a 20 and a 50 for many, many weddings and got it done.
Yeah.
So you can do it
for weddings, right? Like,
yeah, well,
the thing is, like, for video, straight up run and gun, I could take the 28 to 105 on my A7S III and never need a single thing.
Sure.
Ever again. Like, I know that focal range for video is basically perfect for just about everything. The only time you need to go super wide over 28 is going to be for something specialized. And the only time you need way more than 105 for a video is something super specialized. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty awesome. I I'm pretty thrilled about that. How are you feeling about it now that it's kind of settled and we're just waiting
You know
impatiently?
what's interesting? It's almost like a double-edged sword where now with the reveal of this lens, are we now supposed to going forward expect basically G Master quality out of Sigma for future lens releases? I mean, the breathing is seemingly extremely well controlled. We've known their build quality is quite good. Optically looks hella sharp, right? Like it's the only thing that you can really complain about, honestly, is like the weight and size, I guess. But that's what you get for
That's
the design.
That's physics. So like
People are like trying to compare this against it like a 24-70 or even the 24 to 120, the f4, I think.
Yeah.
Right. So like trying to compare it to an f4 or a smaller focal range lens of the same aperture, it just doesn't make that much sense when you want to talk about size and weight. There's not really room for complaint there. And that's what Sigma did. They released a lens that really had no room for complaint when everyone expected it to be a little bit more than what they are asking for it too.
It's $1,500.
Yeah.
Where do I wake up? Where do I wake up from? Like, we are now at the point in photo video gear that like you can make anything. Because frankly, if I still had to, I can make all the images and videos that I need on an A7 III.
Sure.
You know, like really, like if I can't do it with that, then I'm just not good.
Right.
That, you know, full frame, still does 4K, still shoots beautiful, I think 24 megapixel images. Always like that sensor. It's just a little slow to boot up.
Sure.
But like that and a 28 to 105 f2.8, which we never thought would be a thing, is
someone
just
with
ridiculous.
that combo. If they got that, bought that combo today, A7 III brand new in the box, that lens, they could live with that for years and be totally happy.
Yeah,
Totally.
There's
happy.
There's nothing that you need from that. Like, yes, would it be nice to do a fast prime in there? Sure, but 105 at 2.8 is going to be pretty damn good.
Plenty of compression.
It's
going to look great.
Yeah. I think the biggest complaint that Petapixel and a couple other people had is that it's a little busy in the bokeh, which is fine. Like, I'm not worried about it on the wide end.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a little better on the tele end anyway, so I'm not really concerned.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, this is my like, I need to go do video project, and I only want to take the lightest amount of stuff. I'm gonna take a microphone, my A7S III, and this lens, and I won't need and probably a ND filter. But like, wow.
How many episodes in a row are we going to have us just singing praises for Sigma? And at this point, it was like you mentioned, Petapixel had to find something to say about it negative, right? And the bouquet being a little busy, I guess, but it's an incredible lens. It really is. So
have a better composition.
Yeah, that's really what it was. That's really like, what it came.
Move your subject to something with a nicer background.
you're picking on, quite frankly, almost a subjective nuance there, right? So
yeah, right, for sure.
Outside of that, I'm extremely excited.
Yeah,
I just, I mean, what are they going to release on the next episode? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, and it's, again, I just can't believe that they truly are getting to G Master level, and I guess I probably understand why Canon doesn't want them on their mount.
Yeah,
because like people aren't going to buy the much more expensive kind of exclusive Canon lenses over the Sigmas. Like, there's going to be so many people that don't buy Canon stuff. A lot of people will buy it when they're professionals because they have to. But and to Canon's credit, they are working on stuff. Have you looked at their 28 to 70 f2.8 much other than like you and I chatting?
Not much else after that.
Yeah, because like in a perfect world, 2 years ago, if Sony released this, I would have been super stoked, right? Like, this is incredible. This is going to be cheaper. If you're not worried, you know, like the contemporary Sigma, if you just want like an affordable way to have a standard zoom f2.8, cool. However, Nikon did this too, and it took me a second. Jared Poland made a story that he like was complaining about it, but it's one of those lenses where you zoom all the way out, and then it has like a whole space that locks and pushes the barrel in.
Yeah.
And I was like, where have I seen that before? And I was irked about it before. Freaking the 24 to 70 Nikon Z S lens, the f4 24 to 70 from them also does that. And it's just, I get it. I totally get it. But it would bother the hell out of me. There's no way I keep that lens.
Yeah.
So at what cost? When I've been using a 28 to 70 f2.8 from Sigma for the last 3 years, and it's incredible. It's like probably one of the best sub $1,000 lenses, and it goes on sale regularly for $699, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. So Sigma's just nuts. I mean, it helps that the E-mount is letting them do whatever they want, other than like the only downside is that it can't shoot over 15 frames a second still, which is whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the L-mount alliance, what have you, appears to be kind of proving to be incredibly good for Sigma and for users that are getting the benefits of that lens.
Yeah.
I did notice, I didn't notice this at all. I was watching the Petapixel podcast, and they were talking about how the Leica like SL lenses, the like $5,000 or $3,000, $3,500, 70 to 200 or something like that, is the, I can't remember if it was the Sigma or if it was the Panasonic design. But it basically, they're just taking, I think it's the Sigma. I think they took like the Sigma design, they put it in a Leica, they made it like way more expensive. And the reason why that's confusing to me is that they're all on L mount. So like there's going to be some people that will get the Leica, and the Leica 70 to 200, that's $3,500 in the same exact design for more than double the money. Also gets rid of stabilization. So like it just doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't.
So at least Canon's not doing that.
No. Speaking of Sigma, though, did you happen to see their post yesterday on Instagram?
I'm not sure. Tell me about it.
28 to 45 concept lens they are unveiling.
Yeah.
Have they done this before? Unveil a concept lens? Like they're just looking for feedback on whether they should do this?
Probably. So look, this makes perfect sense that they would make a Cine version of the 28 to 45 f1.8.
Okay.
In this case, it's a T2.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see, so long as they do something about the breathing in that lens, because that's the big downfall of the 28 to 45 is that it breathes a lot. So when you put it in a Cine housing, that doesn't all of a sudden make it what I want to use for Cine if it isn't parfocal and it isn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it has all these downsides. However, apparently it's also autofocus.
Yeah, saw that.
So it's a Cine lens that has autofocus. And there's a couple of small companies, Chinese companies and stuff, releasing these autofocus, whether it be like a random anamorphic lens or like Cine primes that have auto. There's all these people kind of doing that. So it would make sense for Sigma to go, okay, where in the market can we fit something that maybe it has a clutch? I didn't look into it so much, but if it has a physical manual clutch and stuff like that, there will be video people that want it. I happen to know Mark Bone from Art of Documentary. He's been running the 28 to 45 f1.8 on his FX6, and because it's just like that's mega for super shallow run and gun documentary work. It's like it's basically why I like the 28 to 105, except like a couple of primes. You have a 28, a 35, and almost a 50 mil prime in one zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, Sigma had the 24 to 50 f2 years ago, which I always said was such a good lens because it's essentially like having those three primes. So it's a lot like that.
I just found it interesting. I think this is the first time I'm seeing Sigma just come out confident with like, first of all, just a concept lens post, be like, hey, this is something we're actually designing. We don't know if it's going to come to the market. What's the interest level? And it looks like all the video people are like, please.
Yeah. Well, and their Cine primes of their art lenses that they have, and even the zoom. They have the 18 to 35 that they made into a Cine lens, and they have the 50 to 100 that they turned into a Cine lens. Those are like $5,000 lenses.
Sure.
So this thing isn't going to be cheap.
It's not going to be cheap.
And we happen to be, I don't know how much you've been paying attention to it, but we are kind of at a global like parts supply issue.
Yeah.
This is why a lot of the Sony announcements have been pushed back slightly. It looks like we're not going to get an A7 IV until next year.
Yeah, I saw Pizzini's video.
Yeah. Fuji obviously has been having like supply woes, moving a ton of stuff to China, things like that. So I think the R5 II and the R1 is suffering from that. Maybe the 120 to 300 that Canon just produced is also having some supply issues. So maybe it's like, if we can get this demand high enough, will it allow us to like actually allocate those resources to that project because it'll be profitable?
Sure.
Or should we not do it? So like, because the market for supply is such that like it's not easy to do that. If they were to just try and make enough to bring to market and then like people hate it, they could have a disastrous, multi-million-dollar problem on their hands, like legitimately, because these are expensive lenses.
What I think Sigma has is the intuition and like the connection with the market right now to know exactly what's needed. And it seems to me that they have the ability to deliver now, deliver beyond expectation now. So whether that translates well enough to a Cine zoom lens that's going to cost, 4 times as much as what they've been releasing in the last couple of years, I don't know. But I would be willing to bet that they could find themselves competent in that space. Yeah. $5,000. I mean, you would hope breathing would be fixed, right? At that price.
Yeah, well, and you would, but you never know. Maybe it's just like, hey, is this interesting enough? People, it's not like the breathing is so disastrous that you could never use it for video.
No, but give them a good reason to spend the money, and I think they can.
Right, of course. Well, and they also can just ask now because they're in such good favor. It's not like anyone's going to be like, wow, what are you even doing? Just make good equipment. They're like, we spit out a new bomb-ass lens that no one's ever heard of every 2 months.
Yes.
We can do whatever we want.
This is the headspace that they command now. You're totally right. They don't.
You're
it's
like,
not even a risk
to
to unveil a concept. Ask 6, 7, 8 years ago if if they posted a concept lens, people would be like, and it's gonna suck, right? But no, we're not there anymore. They can post kind of whatever they want, throwing it out there for feedback, and people are going to go, well, it's going to be great. Yeah, just release it. What a space to be in for basically any company. That's just good for them.
The CEO has had all of his little interviews and videos, and he's very focused on one thing, and that's producing the highest quality glass for the systems that they're working on. And because they don't really have to sit there, again, listen, when they were kind of struggling and they didn't really know what was going on, they were still trying to make all the Nikon stuff, all the Canon stuff, all the Micro Four Thirds stuff, all the everything. They basically are just doing the one design for L mount, which is their mount. The Sigma FP exists.
Yeah.
So it's a native lens for Sigma. And they're just like, how do we make this super good? And then we have the formula to make that basically transition over to the E-mount.
Yeah.
And so they can be super narrowly focused. That's why they're making first-party moves, because they're making first-party glass.
Yeah.
They make their own lenses for their system. Their system isn't that good. I don't think they were ever considering it to be that good. That's why the L-mount alliance happened. But listen, like Lumix, which we don't talk about too much, but I'm still kind of like rooting in their corner all the time.
Sure.
They're on the L mount.
Yep.
The S5 II is an incredible camera, now has phase detect autofocus. If you just need like the maximum options for doing video on the cheapest budget, you buy an S5 II or an S5 IIX and a 28-105, and you can go shoot anything on the planet.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, and it's going to run. And the cool thing about the L mount stuff is they're not plagued with the limitation that E mount is with like frames a second and stuff. So like, get after it. The thing can shoot as fast as your camera can, and those things shoot super fast too.
Yeah.
So it's first party quality stuff, and we're just good, and we're fortunate enough to be on the good graces of Sigma over on the E mount side that we get all of this great shit.
And last I checked, they had no shareholders to please. Is that correct? They are a private company, right?
I have no idea, but
I don't think they're public. But
I imagine if they were public, they'd probably be trading in Japan.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't think they're a publicly traded company. I don't think they have to answer to shareholders. I think that helps them stay focused.
For sure. I agree. I mean, they're doing a great job. Like, I think they'd be absolutely keeping shareholders happy. They're making incredible stuff.
Well, sure, yeah. But often the case is before they can get to that point, they're veered off.
They get stifled.
Where's the profits? Yeah.
Right, yeah. So they make like bad stuff. But
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much all I had. I did want to say from CineD, this Viltrox Luna crazy ass lens would have been way less exciting if I knew that they just made a crazy one like a few months ago.
Tell me about this. I don't know what you're talking about.
So Viltrox makes like a bunch of third party, like pretty good primes for Fuji and some E-mount stuff, and they're just a Chinese company, but they make quality stuff. People like their things. People like their primes and stuff. They released a 30 to 300 f4 cinema lens. That cost $65,000
what?
on PL mount, and 30 to 300 f4 Cine lens.
Okay, first
zoom.
of all, does just 30 to 300 f4 does that exist anywhere?
Probably not.
So it's their design.
Unless you're in those like those crazy broadcast lenses that are like 20 to 1200 or whatever that they use at the Super Bowl and stuff.
Or is it maybe that can they patent shop and be like, hey, Canon, you designed this patent like 16 years ago. Let us give it a try. We'll sell it for $65,000.
I don't know, but this month they announced that they've made a 42 to 420 millimeter T 5.6.
Oh my!
And that's $100,000. So
okay.
They're these giant. Well, you're talking about what is that? 40 times, or 10 times optical freaking cinema zooming power.
Okay, I guess when I said who, I didn't really think about like Hollywood. Maybe Hollywood.
Well, yeah, that's what it's
Which
this
is
going to be like
drop
a
in the
crazy.
bucket.
And if it's par-focal, you're talking about crash zooms into oblivion, and like again, these are PL mount lenses for big cinema cameras.
Yeah.
They have a giant handle on the top, and they're like a bazooka, as you might imagine. It's like this is like the 200 to 500 Sigma, the f2.8 or whatever, that big green guy. It's a lot like that. This thing, it's sweet. I kind of want to touch one. I read the CineD article. I'll post it in the description below. I got it off of Sony Alpha Rumors, but the person writing the article says, I honestly thought this thing was going to be like ridiculous, and I thought that the focus and the zoom was going to be brutal, and it was so well dampened, and it felt so nice. I was like, what is this? And it still has like a 0.8 like gear ratio, so like your follow focuses are going to work exactly how there's. I don't know what the hell this is. It's sick.
Interesting. So I don't know much about Viltrox. I've never handled any Viltrox equipment, but from what I've read, at least Sony consumers seem to like them. Do they only produce manual focus lenses? Is that correct?
No, they make a bunch of autofocus stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm a little behind on them, so that's interesting.
Yeah, because they're just like, I don't know, the would-be Chinese company, but like they make like a good like 35 mil, I think f1.8 or f1.4, I can't remember, but like they make okay stuff.
Yeah,
a lot of the like Sony only YouTuber guys review a lot of their stuff, and they seem to really like them. But those are also guys that only shoot Sony gear and probably need to make a little bit of a YouTube buck.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I'm never going to complain about a company taking risks and providing something that hasn't been there before to the market. There's never anything wrong with that. And obviously there's a market in Hollywood. That's what it's marketed for. They can charge whatever the hell they want for it.
Yeah.
It's cool to see it.
All right. I mean, this would be probably like, I don't know, some wild boy like rental house would probably have one of these and make their money back in a few years. Like it is what it is. You're talking about business investments and things. It's a different world.
Totally.
But anyway, super cool.
I did want to bring up, I don't remember if I got it or mentioned it on the last episode, but I have been playing around with that Polar Pro lens, the 16 millimeter. I thought it was worth mentioning. If you do yourself a favor and go look online at Polar Pro's website, check out the light leak lenses, just so you can have a visual idea of what I'm talking about here. The 16 millimeter that I got, there's 3 of them. The 16 mil is quite wide, as you'd expect out of a 16 mil, but only about 20% of the frame in the center is in focus. And this is something that I didn't quite grasp when I ordered the lens. It is the other way to say that is 80% of your frame is out of focus. That's a tough pill to swallow. However, that in itself is part of its character, and I have to learn to use it the way that kind of shows off that character the best. So I'm not unhappy with the lens. I like a good challenge. If I paid 10 times the price, I would be sending it back. If I paid 3 times the price, I'd probably send it back. But for what it is, I took a shot last night, a self-portrait of me looking at the Northern Lights, and I was like, when you involve a person and emotion and some kind of event or experience, you kind of forego the technical stuff a little bit and just go, that was a nice moment to capture. And this was the first real shot that I took with that lens going, I like that.
Sure.
So it kind of validated for me. And that's all it took really, was one good shot to I'm not trying to like justify it to myself right now. I do genuinely enjoy using the thing. I think it's so neat and fun. But we're working with it. And I don't know if I'll post any on the main feed, but I might post some of that stuff to stories and just have fun with it. I think it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's jumping on the like everybody's into the like disposable camera vibe. And I think if it wasn't going to be delayed by very long, I was looking at getting the 28 so we could play with it when I come up to Marquette. I don't know, maybe I'll buy the 50 if it's just like ready to ship. I think that would be like the least exciting version of it, but it could also be really cool and I could be wrong as hell. So who knows?
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting idea, and it's not like it's like a crazy money grab, because it looks like it's pretty high quality, and it's like it's $129. Like, you know, don't buy this if you're like tight on cash or whatever. But if you are already like us and we have, you know, $2,000 cameras and stuff like that. But even if you have like an old 6300 or something, I bet this is a ton of fun.
The company Polar Pro has had a bit of a history now making relatively high quality equipment for what they make. So I wasn't concerned about like build quality or feeling cheap or anything like that. What you actually get out of the box feels great. It's nice to hold, and the light leak effect, for its namesake, works pretty well. So I would imagine if you did end up getting either the 28 or the 50, just having a lens with that on it would be fun to play with, regardless of its character differences. So if you bring either one, I think we would have fun with them.
Yeah. And I think they're cool. Like, I'm always looking for something that you can just slap on a camera and mess around with it. Yeah. Have you been running it in crop mode more and getting more? Yeah,
so that's one thing. I mentioned that to you. The effect is so harsh. Harsh is a harsh word to say, but the vignetting too is something that I wasn't totally aware of how dark it was. It almost looks like you're running a crop lens. It's so dark around the corners. So yes, I ran it in crop mode on the A7 IV, and that takes care of some of the issues, right? So like most of the heavy vignetting is just chopped off, but also just like framing up and understanding the image, looking at your image, more percentage of the image is going to be in focus pixels because you're cropping out out of focus pixels only, right? So
Yeah.
I do find it enjoyable to put it in crop mode and shoot with it that way too. But I did put it in full frame mode for this shot out last night
Cool.
with Northern Lights, and just played with the wide and just let it do its thing. I just knew to put myself relatively in center, and had my horizon in center where you could see some green and stuff. And so like the most important bits were kind of compressed to the center and let everything fall out. And I think that's kind of just like the way you're supposed to do it. So it was fun.
Yeah, I mean it's a pinhole. So you're dealing with something that probably isn't going to excel in like scenery. It's not going to necessarily excel for infinity focus.
Details are just lost.
Yeah, you're going to be in that intermediate like zone focused area.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay with parts of your subject being out of focus or soft as hell.
Yeah.
And it's like those nostalgic retro memories, right? Like the freaking footage, or not the footage, but the photos that they have as sample images. You're like, there's no way they like edited those to look like they want this.
Yeah.
Because they're good. Like,
yes,
but you can't put it past them. They got guys like Peter McKinnon and Garrett King and all those guys shoot super great stuff. So they have the know-how and the team to make good images, but it's wild.
If you're listening to this and you know about the product, it is an f11 fixed aperture, fixed focus lens. So if you're asking how the hell did you shoot the Northern Lights at f11, I did it at ISO 12,800 at 13-second exposures. Even at f11, you can expose when you have a full moon brightness, and b, a hella good Northern Lights session going on. You see some stuff. So I wasn't too worried about not seeing anything at all. I was a little more worried about the character of the lens, to be honest with you, but I got the shot and it looks all right.
Sure. Yeah, you should text that to me. I want to see it.
Yeah.
But that's all I have. I got to get out of here. I'm going to go get some dinner and head over to the hospital. If you liked this episode, please say something. I know there's some of you listening because we have a decent amount of concurrent same people viewers.
Yeah.
I don't know. Say that you hate my hat or my glasses or something. Say something about photography. The next episode that we shoot will in fact be a photo share of portraits. So if
you have
would like
2
to
weeks.
share,
you have 2 weeks.
Yeah. So if you would like to share some portrait images, and by that I mean one solid portrait image that you shot, I am giving one exception to a buddy because he's going to be sending in one film and one digital.
That's okay with
me. So if you have a film and a digital, I'm super into that, but I'd like to leave this to one image otherwise. And we're going to be talking about them. I like portraits. I'm getting back into it. I'm going to have, if I can't get a good portrait with the kit that I'm renting this Friday, on our next podcast, I will be selling all my gear in an auction style on a live on YouTube for pennies. So,
and then you have to just pick up that Fuji Instax wide camera and just run with that for the next year.
And that's all I'm going to ever shoot on for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because I'm no longer going to be a real photographer.
Thanks for listening, guys. If you're on YouTube, share this with your friends. If you find this interesting, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you can leave a review, you couldn't on Google Podcasts, but it doesn't matter anyway. That doesn't exist anymore.
They're gone.
Thank you, everybody. See you later.
Follow David. Follow me. Follow Light Overtime on Instagram. I'm also on X. But yeah, anyway.
Goodbye.
Good talking. Bye, guys.